Good morning. Welcome to the online worship service for Sunday, April 25th. My name is Ashley Miltner. I am the CE Director here at Trinity, and I'm filling in for Andrew today while he is visiting family. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. Gracious Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. A few announcements for those of you who will be coming to visit us these next 5 weeks that we have left here in the building. Please excuse our dust. The staff has begun moving everything out of all of the rooms, so it's going to look a little chaotic inside, but for those of you at home, you won't have to see that. Today we are going to read Psalm 131. A song of quiet trust, a song of ascents of David. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up, my eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with its mother, my soul is like the weaned child that is with me. O Israel, hope in the Lord, from this time on and forevermore. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, as I said, my name is Ashley Miltner. I am the Director of Christian Education here at Trinity United Church of Christ, and I am happy to be here today filling in for Andrew. I was supposed to preach originally on Martin Luther King Day, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we were not able to come inside the building. So while the search continues to find a replacement for Reverend Diane, Abraham McCune and myself have begun helping to write and give sermons a few weekends when we can and take a little load off of Reverend Andrew. I've really enjoyed diving into the Word and revisiting my English college days, where I would research every single word in a line and uncover its hidden meaning. What I didn't expect to discover was how much I could relate to these few lines of prayer by David, lifted up in song to God. In Psalm 131, we are given a glimpse into the battles David felt in his soul and the struggles he faced with his communication with God. When I talk with people about the stories of the Bible, many say that they're unrelatable to our times today. But in my personal opinion, Psalm 131 is very relatable. I personally have struggled with anxiety after moving away to college. I grew up practicing as a Catholic. What was unique to my situation is I was only raised as a Catholic as long as my father was taking me until my parents got a divorce when I was 8 years old. From then on, I began attending church with my neighbors, and all of the parents, including my mom, would take turns carpooling all of the neighbor kids to Sunday school, and then we would all go to church together. We lived on a dead-end street, and it was just a really tight-knit community, and I feel so blessed that I had my neighbors to help me get to church when I really wanted to go. We all went religiously to church, no pun intended. The thing is, from that young age, I remember my soul and my spirit trying to find out what it meant to have faith. I can remember having conversations with God from the time I was just a little kid. Divorce will make you talk to God, as do many trials that we experience in our lives. As a young adult, I attended church, but slowly I stopped attending every Sunday. As a college student, sometimes attending church would look like listening to the local church over the radio on Sunday morning while having breakfast, or watching a live stream of a local church. However, in my spiritual journey, I continued to seek God, to know God, and pray and have conversations with God. I can relate, though, to how David felt in this psalm. How many of us have had hard times when our hearts are not feeling lifted up? David's heart is feeling heavy when he says, "My eyes are not raised too high." You can picture someone, perhaps, who is feeling down and they're looking at the ground. When you're feeling sad and depressed or discouraged, you don't carry your head lifted high. Then David sings, "I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me." Have you ever felt a time in your life where you are just living a mediocre life? You don't think what you have is too marvelous or too great. Maybe you wish you drove a nicer car or had a bigger house. Maybe you wish you aged a bit more gracefully, had a head of fuller hair, had more money in your bank account. These might just seem like materialistic things. But what about when we feel our connection with those we love and care about in our lives is lacking? What about when we feel an ache in our soul due to feeling lost on our spiritual walk with God? How does that make you feel inside? The thing is, all of these worries and times of unrest can trouble our soul and break our spirit. When our minds start taking over, we feel stuck, worrying about something that happened in the past, something that might happen tomorrow, and then our spirit is not able to shine from all of that worry. Our soul is like the id in Freudian terms. Our id is all of the things we want right now. Just like a child, especially in today's society, they see something and they want it right now. I would know. I have 2 little kids at home. I was listening to Pastor Paul Leboudier preach a sermon on Psalm 131 for research as I was preparing to write this sermon, and I just knew God led me to his message. Pastor Paul was explaining how when his children were very young, they were out of control, and it wasn't until someone told him to get them in control that he realized how much they were the ones in charge. We can't let our minds be the untamed child who is yearning to be in control. We have to settle our hearts, our mind, our soul, and our spirit to be ready to listen to God. When Reverend Andrew asked me to preach this weekend in his place on this psalm, I remember thinking, how am I going to figure out what to say about this verse? But that was my mind trying to be in charge of my soul and the enemy doing his best to crush my spirit. That was my fear and my anxiety speaking for me. How ironic that this psalm is all about how David is telling God that he is not feeling worthy. How many times in your life have you not felt worthy enough? What we need to do to be able to hear the Spirit is quiet our minds and the worry in our souls and just listen for God, and maybe we might hear him speak to us. David believed his soul was something that could be quieted and compared his soul to that of an unruly child that needed to be hushed. When he sang, "But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. My soul is like the weaned child within me." Here, David is comparing his spirit to one with a calm and quieted soul, ready to hear God's voice. When we give in to our feelings and our souls become boisterous and just like an unruly child who is not getting their way or getting it quickly enough. It is the id, or our inner child, talking. As adults, we help children learn to control themselves. At least we try our best to do so. We help them to control their attitudes, to control their responses, and to control their emotions. Have you ever lost your temper? As adults, we are still a work in progress. Does your mind ever wander and you have trouble focusing on the task at hand? How many of you are thinking right now about what you need to do when you're done listening to this sermon today? Or maybe you are thinking of something that happened this morning. Maybe you are sitting there wondering what you're going to have for lunch or what you're going to do when you leave. Even as adults, we have trouble quieting our minds long enough to listen to God. If you don't quiet your own soul inside yourself, you won't be able to hear the voice of God speaking to you. So what can we do? Does a child become perfectly well-behaved in one day? I wish. But no, it happens over time. Children find their boundaries by pushing them. How many times have you seen a child out in public acting boisterous, throwing a temper tantrum, and the parent is trying to quiet them down, trying to regain control? Teachers face this battle daily. What is so important for us to learn is how to be quiet. Well, we cannot hear someone speak to us if we are not quiet enough to listen. My two boys were blessed with two parents who really like to talk. They take after both of us in that department. My mom likes to tell me this is my payback for being such a talkative child. Now I find myself constantly telling my boys, use your indoor voices, or would you please listen to me the first time? I know that a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old are still a work in progress. And at almost 36 years old, so am I. You are never too old to teach your soul to sit quietly and listen to our Creator. You're never too old to get started on that either. Our souls are like an unruly child that cannot be controlled. But God wants to commune with us. But to hear God, we have to quiet whatever is weighing on our hearts and minds. David is telling God that he has learned to control that unruly child and that his soul is ready to hear God speak to him. But first, David had to talk to his soul like you would talk to a child. Do you ever talk to yourself when you need a pick-me-up? If you're ever struggling and having a really hard time, or you're dealing with something that's really bringing you down, stressing you out, making you feel depressed or anxious, do you give yourself a pep talk like, come on, you're not going to let this bring you down. You've got this. Or today is a new day. Today is the day the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. Well, that is what David is doing here. He's giving himself a little pep talk. He's saying, stop acting this way. Or we might need to say, sit still. David told his soul to just be quiet. We have to tell our souls to be quiet and sit still. Psalm 46:10 says, be still and know that I'm God. God is saying, I'm here. You don't have to worry about it. Just like we know our famous phrase, let go and let God. We need to not trouble our minds with our worries, our fears, our anxieties, the things that cause us to feel depressed. We need to give that to God and let our mind be free. We need to have that time to just sit in quiet meditation and to try to not think about all of the things popping up in our head and just take some of that time to listen. Our soul is like that boisterous child who wants to be the center of attention. If you learn to sit and meditate, you can calm your soul. And then you may be able to hear the voice of God. I'll close with a story. When I was a teen, I was invited to a Christian camp at Camp Christopher called Search. I rode with some friends who were able to drive, and I was a very talkative girl at the age of 15. That might be hard for some of you to imagine, I know. That was a time in my spiritual journey when my soul was yearning to know and understand God more. I wanted to hear God speak to me. but I wasn't very good at being quiet. For anyone who thinks God is not still at work in our lives today, you might need to be quiet long enough to listen. So there I was at camp, listening to a friend's CD player, waiting for them. They were behind the scenes. They were working the weekend, so they had all these secret surprises that us campers attending couldn't know about. And other campers started to arrive, and I just laid on the bunk bed and was waiting for my friends to come back and collect me. I didn't know any of the other people yet, and I wasn't feeling brave enough to talk to them yet. Well, lo and behold, when I was collected by my friends, I went to talk, and I realized I couldn't speak. My voice was gone. It was completely gone. I actually spent that entire weekend just listening to people give their talks, listening to their stories, listening to the words and the songs that we sang that weekend. And that was one of the most amazing spiritual experiences I've had in my life, and I still remember that to this day. At the end of the weekend, they give out awards for funny little things, and they're on paper plates. And my award was the best listener with laryngitis. At the very end of the weekend, I still hadn't had my voice back. There was a chance where everyone could get up and say something about the weekend, something that meant something to them. And everyone was like, "Come on, Ashley, get up there, say something, say something." My voice was like slowly just squeaky coming back at that time. And I actually have quite a fear of public speaking, so I really didn't want to get up there, but I decided to be brave. And when I did, my voice came back. And I got to share this wonderful experience that I had that weekend. And I know that that was God's hand at work. I know that God still speaks to us even today, but it might not be hearing a voice in your head. It's different than that. For me, God was telling me, you need to be quiet this weekend. You need to quiet your voice long enough to be able to listen. And I'm so glad God gave me that lesson. When we are willing to quiet our soul long enough, God will speak to us. Thank you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen.